Hi, I'm Rachel Morgan, and this is the story of how my seemingly perfect sister's greed led to her downfall. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch out for. My sister Claire learned this lesson the hard way. I grew up in my grandmother Rose's antique shop, timeless treasures, breathing in the history of every piece she carefully curated. While Claire was winning beauty pageants and collecting academic honors, I was learning the stories behind centuries-old jewelry and rare collectibles. Grandma Rose would always say, "Rachel, dear, you have an old soul. You understand that true value isn't always visible at first glance." If only I had understood how prophetic those words would become. Claire was the family star, master's degree in business, successful real estate agent, perfect husband, dream house under construction. I was the quiet one, spending my weekends helping Grandma in the shop, taking online courses in art history and appraisal. "You're wasting your life with all that old junk," Claire would say during family dinners, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. "You need to think bigger." But I saw something in those old pieces of junk that others didn't. Each item had a story, a history, a hidden value that most people overlooked. Grandma Rose understood this about me. While Claire was busy climbing the social ladder, I was learning the intricate art of authenticating antiques, building relationships with collectors, and most importantly, understanding the true value of patience. Everything changed when Grandma Rose got sick. Cancer, stage 4. Rachel, she called me to her hospital bed one evening, her voice weak, but her eyes sharp as ever. "There's something you need to know about the shop." She told me about a secret, one that would change everything. But before she could finish, Claire burst in with her usual dramatic timing, trailing designer perfume, and interrupted our conversation. "Grandma, the specialist I found in New York can see you next week." The next few months were a blur of hospital visits and family tensions. Claire threw money at expensive treatments, making sure everyone knew how much she was contributing to the family. I simply sat with Grandma, listening to her stories, learning the last lesson she wanted to teach me. One quiet afternoon, just days before she passed, Grandma Rose handed me a small key. "The safe in my office," she whispered. "Don't tell anyone until the right time." I nodded, tucking the key away, not knowing how crucial it would become. The will reading was set for a week after the funeral. I arrived early at the lawyer's office, dressed in my simple black dress that Claire always criticized as shabby. Claire swept in last, immaculate in designer morning wear, her husband James in tow. "Let's begin." Mr. Patterson, the family lawyer, adjusted his glasses. "To my beloved granddaughters." The room fell silent as he read. Grandma Rose had left the antique shop, including all inventory and property, to me. Claire's face turned an interesting shade of red. "This is ridiculous," she exploded. "Rachel can barely pay her rent. How can she run a business? She'll ruin Grandma's legacy." But Mr. Patterson wasn't finished. Claire would receive a substantial cash inheritance, contingent on the shop remaining in my ownership for at least 5 years. "This is absurd." Claire stood up, her voice shaking. "Rachel's been stealing from the shop for years. I have proof." She pulled out a folder, slapping it on the lawyer's desk. Security camera footage, inventory discrepancies, missing deposits. I had an audit done. She's been pocketing valuable items and cash for months. My heart stopped. The documents looked official. Spreadsheets, photographs, even bank statements. James, Claire's husband, stepped forward, his face grave. "As a financial advisor, I can confirm these irregularities. They're very serious." "I would never." My voice cracked. Grandma Rose trusted me. Clearly, she was too senile to see what was happening. Claire spat. "I'm contesting the will. Rachel's not fit to run the shop. She'll destroy everything Grandma built." I stood up, tears streaming down my face, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Claire already discussing taking over the shop's management with Mr. Patterson. But as I drove away, my hand clutched the small key in my pocket, and a plan began forming in my mind. That evening, as I sat in my small apartment, I remembered all the lessons Grandma Rose had taught me about patience, about hidden value, about waiting for the right moment. Claire thought she had won, but she had forgotten the most important lesson of the antique business: everything valuable leaves a paper trail. I pulled out my laptop and began typing. By morning, Claire would learn that sometimes the quiet ones are quiet because they're watching, waiting, and planning. The next day would bring revelations that none of them expected. The next morning dawned bright and early. I arrived at Timeless Treasures just as the sun was rising, using my key one last time. Or so Claire thought. The shop was quiet, filled with the subtle smell of wood polish and history that I'd known all my life. I walked straight to Grandma's office, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors. The safe was hidden behind a Victorian oil painting, a piece Claire had always dismissed as dreary. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key Grandma had given me. Inside, I found exactly what Grandma Rose had promised: leather-bound ledgers, USB drives, and a sealed envelope with my name. But most importantly, I found the truth that would change everything. At precisely 9 a.m., Claire burst through the shop's door with James and their lawyer in tow. "But you're here," she smirked. "We can do this civilly. Just sign over the shop, and we'll forget about pressing charges for the theft." I smiled, thinking about Grandma Rose's favorite saying about patience. "Before we do anything, I think you should see what's in Grandma's safe." The safe. Claire's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. "What safe?" I laid out the contents on Grandma's antique mahogany desk. "Let's start with these ledgers. You see, Grandma Rose kept 2 sets of books, one for the shop's regular business, which you audited, and another for her special collection." "Special collection," James interjected, his financial advisor instincts kicking in. "Yes." I opened one of the ledgers. You see, while everyone thought this was just a quaint antique shop, Grandma Rose was one of the most respected private art and antiquities authenticators on the East Coast. "Those missing deposits you found? They were consulting fees, paid in cash and properly reported to the IRS, of course." Claire's face paled slightly. "You're lying." I plugged in one of the USB drives to Grandma's computer, turning the screen toward them. "These are videos of every major authentication she performed over the last 15 years, including, interestingly enough, several pieces for your clients, James." James stepped back, his confident demeanor cracking. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No. Let me refresh your memory. 3 years ago, you brought in a client with a supposedly rare Tiffany lamp. Grandma proved it was fake, but you sold it anyway as authentic. She kept records of everything." I pulled out more documents. "She also kept records of every time you tried to use the shop to authenticate forged pieces for your wealthy clients' insurance scams. That's why she never let you take over the business aspects, Claire. She knew you were helping James defraud clients." "You can't prove any of this," Claire whispered, but her face had turned ashen. "Actually, I can. You see that audit you had done? It triggered an automatic alert to Grandma's lawyer, the real one, not Mr. Patterson here, who I assume is James's friend." The hired lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Her actual attorney has already filed reports with both the FBI's art crime team and the SEC. Claire collapsed into a chair, her designer outfit suddenly looking deflated. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you never understood what Grandma was building here. You saw an old shop with dusty furniture, but she created a legacy of trust and expertise, and you tried to steal it by framing me." I opened the sealed envelope, pulling out one final document. "But here's the real surprise. Remember that dream house you're building? The one you took out 3 mortgages on because James' investments aren't doing so well." Claire's head snapped up. "How do you?" "Grandma knew everything. She knew James was using your construction loans to cover his investment losses. That's why she left me not just the shop, but also her entire private authentication business, including her client list of legitimate collectors who actually have money to invest in real estate." Through the shop's windows, we could see police cars pulling up outside. Claire jumped to her feet. "You called the police?" "No," I replied calmly. "That would be the FBI Art Crimes Division. Apparently, some of James's clients have been asking questions about their collections. What happened next was chaos. James tried to run but didn't make it past the vintage armoire by the door. Claire screamed about family loyalty and betrayal. The FBI agents were particularly interested in the contents of Grandma's safe. By evening, I sat alone in the shop, running my hands over the smooth wood of Grandma's desk. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from Claire's real estate clients looking for new representation, from legitimate collectors hearing their favorite authenticator's granddaughter was taking over, from investigators asking for cooperation. Mom called, crying about family and forgiveness. "Did it have to end this way?" she asked. Claire gave me no choice, I replied softly. She tried to steal everything Grandma built. She forgot that just because something looks quiet and simple on the surface doesn't mean it's not valuable. 3 months later, I stood in front of Claire's dream house at the foreclosure auction. James was facing federal charges, and Claire couldn't manage the mortgages on her real estate agent's salary. I won the auction, of course. Turns out authentication consulting pays very well. Timeless Treasures has flourished. I've expanded the authentication business while keeping the charming antique shop front that Grandma loved. Every now and then, I get postcards from Claire. She's selling timeshares in Florida now. I don't respond, but I keep them in a vintage letterbox on my desk. Sometimes, when I'm closing up the shop, I look at Grandma Rose's portrait and smile. You were right, I whisper. True value isn't always visible at first glance. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at an international antiquities conference. The topic? Modern authentication in the digital age. I accepted with a smile, thinking about how appearances can be deceiving. After all, I have quite a story to tell. The shop continues to thrive, but more importantly, I found peace with my decisions. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about preserving what matters while letting karma handle the rest. As I write this from Grandma's old office, now mine, I think about the lessons learned. The quiet ones in the family aren't always the weakest. Sometimes they're the ones who see everything, understand the true value of patience, and know exactly when to open the safe. In the end, Claire thought she could steal a simple antique shop. Instead, she lost everything trying to destroy the very legacy that could have secured her future. As Grandma Rose always said, the most valuable things in life are often hidden in plain sight. And sometimes the best revenge is simply proving that the quiet one in the corner was quietly building an empire all along.